Thank you again for joining in on another episode of Let's Talk Fam. This is the third episode of a series of episodes which I am making and releasing in order to help educate and spread good information. Let me ask you a question. What happens when the Black Lives Matter movement dies? Unfortunately, to the news and media outlets, the Black Lives Matter movement is a trend that comes and goes. And unfortunately, some of us fall into the same mentality. We support a social and political cause through social media or signing petitions. But then when no one else covers these stories, we stop. This is known as slackivism. Ask yourself what you did on June 2nd, known as Blackout Tuesday. Did you just post a black photo on social media and did nothing else that day? If you did, unfortunately, you're not contributing to any solution for the near future. The meaning behind Blackout Tuesday was for us to get off of social media and have time to research, educate ourselves, and reflect on what is happening in the world right now and to our Black brothers and sisters. Now granted, I know we are still going through an ongoing global pandemic and we can't really do much right now. But please understand that just because the media stops covering these stories or that Black Lives Matter isn't trending anymore on Twitter or no one's using these hashtags, that doesn't mean the movement stops. The Black Lives Matter movement gained global attention in 2014 following the murders of Michael Brown and Eric Garner, as well as the acquittals of the officers involved in these murders. And social media was being very vocal about it. They were sharing stories, retweeting, posting, and asking everyone to sign the petitions for change. But then when news started to cover other stories, these movements and those that were so vocal just quieted down, and in a sense the trend died. And then the George Floyd case broke, followed by David McGatty, then Breonna Taylor, and the Toronto case of Regis Krasinski. These unjust murders brought life back into the Black Lives Matter movement. Unfortunately, these stories broke during a time where we can't do much considering we are still going through an ongoing global pandemic. If you haven't watched my first part of this series, I talked about how the media controls the narrative. They control what we see and what we hear. They easily influence the thousands of millions of people around the world into believing and viewing things in a certain light. And then when these stories are replaced with other stories and other stories, it just seems like it fades into history. And in the status quo returns, where everyone just goes back to their lives and is naive about what's happening in the world. But what happens when another murder motivated by racism and discrimination breaks? All of a sudden, the media says it's breaking news and that this has never happened before. It's such a new and shocking incident and a development in whatever city it's happening in. Let's pretend like everything we've seen this month, this year alone, hasn't happened before. So I talked about slackivism before and how when news story breaks of a racist cop killing an innocent unarmed black man, then that's when everyone comes out of the woodwork and starts being more vocal and sharing to their stories, sharing on social media, retweeting, liking, and all this shit. But we can do so much more, even though there's still a pandemic going on. We need to talk and have an open discussion about the history and the patterns of behavior we've seen from police officers, violence and systemic racism we've seen against visible minorities, especially black people. This is the whole reason the Black Lives Matter movement has started. It's to fight against the systemic racism and violence against the black community. We also need to understand that racism just isn't in America. We might think that our country or wherever you're living, wherever you are, isn't racist, but the fact of the matter is racism is everywhere. It just so happens that America has all these cases happening right now and in the past, but the fact is racism is everywhere. You might not see it, you might not experience it, but it's happening right now where you are, where you're living. We need to educate ourselves, that way we can educate each other with good information. There are so many helpful resources available online and even on social media right now. I'll link some in the description below, but by you watching this video, you are educating yourself. You can watch the rest of the series to help educate yourself, as in the previous 2 episodes, I've talked about how the media frames stories and makes us think in a certain way. And the second, I talked about the police use of force. And lastly, as a society, we need to stay active not silent. It's good that you're sharing to your stories. It's good that you're retweeting or tweeting support to the Black Lives Matter movement. But we can always do so much more. It's unfortunate to say, but within a month or even a few weeks, the Black Lives Matter movement and protests won't be as popular. We won't be as vocal because other stories will replace the murders of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Regis Krasinski, and David Magatti. So donate, sign petitions, continue protesting on social media. We need to make sure that the Black Lives Matter movement doesn't die and goes away only to resurface weeks or months later. And most importantly, don't stay quiet. Stand up against those who don't support the Black Lives Matter movement or are too ignorant to understand and grasp the severity of what's happening in the world right now. I would rather lose 100 friends than bury one.